You found the skeleton. How would you calculate that distance? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right. Well, we are here for Landon with... Yes, no, Lisle with Landon. I always get that mixed up. It's Lisle with Landon 3, The Revenge, and I'm also joined by my friend Sphincter of Doom, who is another friend of mine from the Navy. So, Landon, why don't you say hello to everybody, introduce yourself?
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone and latitude. And hello from your friendly secular astronomer. And hello there, Sphincter of Doom. And, of course, always a pleasure, Dapper Dinosaur.
Why, thank you. And Sphincter of Doom, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone.
So, as everyone may or may not remember, we have been going through a video series with Jason Lisle, who is, Ken Ham's pet astrophysicist, who's amazingly bad at astrophysics. And this has been called Astronomy Reveals Creation. We're on part 3. Now, part 3 is only 14 and a half minutes long, so there's a fair chance that we're gonna finish well before our normal 2-hour time. So, in the event that happens, Landon does have some astronomy news to talk about. So, and of course, if that still doesn't fill up the full 2 hours, well, it might be a slightly shorter show than normal. But
But we also do QA as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll take questions and stuff. So it'll be fun. But before we get going, we should go over first. What is everybody drinking tonight?
Sphincter?
Oh, I'm drinking unsweetened iced tea.
What is wrong with you?
I didn't get a whole lot of sleep, and I probably need some caffeine.
Did you put any vodka or rum or whiskey or anything?
I only have rum. Rum doesn't seem like a great addition to tea.
Oh well. All right. Well, Landon, what do you got for us? Please be better than unsweetened iced tea.
Yes. Well, I have two options here. One of them, of course, is this very interesting French liqueur here for those that reads French. And this is a very interesting sort of flavor there. This comes from French Polynesia, and it is it has sort of emphasis of a coffee flavor, as well as the main thing being sort of like caramelized.
Okay.
Sugar and so I have that's the one set.
Can you hold it up again, because I'm having trouble making out one of the words. Up a little bit. Canned with what is that? Sugar? Yeah, it is. Sugar and citrus, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
So it has kind of a citrusy flavor to it. Caramelized sugar, and also a little bit of a almost like a coffee flavor, but that could be the way that the citrus and caramelized sugar are there. The other thing is I have a wine, a Pinot Noir from Costa Brown, and this is a 2016 the vineyards from Anderson Valley.
All right, here's what we're gonna do, guys. We're gonna have a vote, but this is gonna be one of the few times I do a members vote. So members, Godzilla in the chat if you want the Godzilla emoji in the chat if you want the liqueur, and put Mothra in the chat if you want the wine. That's what we're gonna go for.
And of course, I can alternate between the two.
Oh, that's true. I mean, this is when I say which one we go for. It's more of a which one we default to. But every once in a while you can switch it up a little bit. But I also want to go through the drinking rules, because we have those, but we do not encourage you to play along. Please be safe and responsible. And feel free to just drink water along with us if that is your preference, or whatever. Just be safe.
Or iced tea.
Yes. Or iced tea for some reason. All right, so
I'm being safe.
Oh, right now we have Mothra, and one of our drink triggers is when the Mothra or the Godzilla sounds play. Take a drink. So here's our first one. There we go.
Hey.
Oh, and I'm drinking a whiskey cola. It's a very basic whiskey cola.
There you go.
Nice. So right now, actually, we're tied on which one it is. So I think mixing it up is the way to go on that.
Okay, I'll alternate back and forth.
All right. Let's see. So we also drink whenever the creationist says something so stupid that we just kind of have to save our sanity. You know.
Yep.
Let's see. We also drink whenever they tell a joke that just doesn't land at all, which is almost every joke because they have really bad jokes. But we also drink whenever they get something right without it being a direct quotation from someone else. If they ever get an actual point of fact completely correct, we'll take a drink. So, I want to put Dr. Lisle. I was going to say Mr. Lisle, but he does have a legitimate PhD, so I will grant that he did the work to be called Dr. Lisle. So,
now we might do a summary of the first two parts.
Yes. Yes. Although I do want to point out one thing. So, do you know what Patriot or Bible University is? That is the quote-unquote school where Kent Hovind got his degree, his alleged PhD. I found out what that costs to get a PhD from Patriot Bible University. It's $2,000. So I've been talking with a few people thinking, like, that's actually a sum that we could probably raise just so we could then actually report on what the PhD process is like at Patriot Bible University to add some transparency to this whole situation. So I don't know if that's actually going to be something that we do, but
I just found a bit of trivia about Dr. Lisle that I found rather surprising. He was born in 1950.
Really?
He's 70 years old. And when was this aired? So 7 years ago. So he was in his 60s when he apparently aired this.
Well, I'll give him this. He looks great for being in his 60s.
Yes.
That's impressive. I would have pegged him for like 40s. So good job, Jason Lisle. You're doing something right. It's not astronomy, but it's something. And Monk Mayfair, if you got a question for me, let's see. Oh, you're drinking an analog 78 Cloche and have a Bacardi cocktail on standby. I expect a lot of stupid. My liver hates Tuesdays. My liver hates Tuesdays too. But yeah, let's go through. So in episode 1, most of it came down to, ooh, the universe is big, isn't it?
Yes, the universe is big, and therefore it said, you know, it proves God because it's glorified. Okay.
I think more specifically is because the universe is unfathomably big and God is unfathomable. Then those are the same thing.
Yeah, but he did a lot of this pictures of, ooh, look, pretty images. Do you realize how big this is? How far away this is? And the audience goes, ooh, oh.
It's a busy day today.
Yeah. I would say so. So then the audience would say, "Ooh, wow," and then he'd say, "See, God is great," and he would have said Allah Akbar, but I think it's wrong religion for him. So,
yeah,
the same logic applies though. So
yeah, it is really. So that was part 1. Any other comments on part 1 before we?
Just I'll say, you know, he could have gone for Alhamdulillah, which works for Arabic Christians too.
So in part 2 was sort of this the science proves the Bible proves science type.
By
of
like
thing.
saying the solar system can't be old because certain parts of it aren't that old.
Yeah, like he had this weird thing about comets, right? That somehow this is a comets meant that.
We have a $2 super chat from Ben Hoven who says drink for Godzilla with a Godzilla emoji, which actually does mean that we drink because when people super chat, the Toho guys.
All right, so let's go back to the wine. I got to keep track of which state I'm in. So the wine there, and by the way, we have other fun people in the chat. Bent, of course, is always a pleasure to see you, and of course, Shasharovic, yay!
Yes.
Cheers to you as well.
Yep. So we've got Ben Hoven, Smitty, Megan Fox's Giant Boobs, Monk Mayfair, Caliban, Icarus. Actually, I've since confirmed that Caliban is his name is a reference both to Shakespeare and to Warhammer. So that's fun.
Excellent.
Yes.
So that part 2 thing was kind of the circular, sort of apologetic circular logic stuff.
Yeah.
Where you said, you know, that's as part of his. So the first one is is the universe is big and pretty, therefore God. And the second one is I think it was more of that the Bible proves science, therefore the Bible is correct, or something like that.
It was something like that, and most of the arguments came down to X structure in the solar system could not have persisted for 4.5 billion years. Therefore, the solar system can't be 4.5 billion years, which is basically the same argument that say, hey, I've got a zit on my nose that got there 2 weeks ago. Therefore, I must only be 2 weeks old.
Yeah, and he had things about saying things like comets that can't last more than a certain number of years. But for example, we just had a really marvelous comet Neowise that had a nearly 7,000 year orbit. Sorry, creationists, and it was coming in for a ride, but it's been baked multiple times, right?
Right.
It did not have primordial material coming off of it.
It's not a fresh comet.
Yes. The other thing he said was magnetic fields. Somehow I'm sure if you pinned him down on Maxwell's equations, he would say yes, blah blah blah. But he was trying to do a sleight of hand with his audience, which I found to be disingenuous to the point of being, let's say, sinful. Is that he kind of implied that magnetic fields are somehow used up, right? You have a magnetic field, and it just like it somehow decays over time because and this is a common conception. You have a magnetic field. People think, well, it must be expending energy, and must the battery must run down. That's not how magnetic fields work.
Right.
Magnetic fields are field effects, and so he was trying to say, oh, look, the magnetic field of Uranus, blah blah, stronger than blah blah blah. Therefore, it can't be that strong. Therefore, and so he was doing this back and forth of see the Bible really predicted science, and science caught up with it, or science determined something the Bible is. A back and forth set of things, which the first part is say, okay, he gets to say big pictures, pretty pictures, blah blah. If you were presenting to a second audience about the wonderful universe we're in, and I consider this universe to be my favorite universe, then I'd be fine. The second one I would say is actually him being disingenuous. That would be putting it charitable. I think he should, if he were subscribing to Christianity stuff, he should ask forgiveness for deceitful language. And so I was disappointed in his ethical presentation.
Yes, I would say that's actually a pretty common problem I find with professional creationists, at least, is a lot of them, I know they know better. Like, I know that Jason Lisle knows better that, like, that's not how magnetic fields work. Like, yes, you can have a magnetic field dissipate if there are sufficient interactions with it, right? Because there's a potential energy, right? Yeah. And so the way I like to think of magnetic fields is that they're basically, you can think of them as sort of like as an area where you can have potential energy, and then actual magnetic interactions between the field and other magnetic objects that can in fact reduce the total energy available. But if you're just a planet rotating around in space without significant electromagnetic interactions with anything else, what's going to
be there for a long time?
Yeah.
If electromagnetic fields dissipated over time, then the electromagnetic fields holding matter together would too.
Yeah, you'd have a lot of problems.
Right, yeah, like why aren't the intermolecular forces just dissipating?
But that would be, if I were in an actual debate, I would sit there and say, according to your Christian principles, you should be, after this lecture, asking God for forgiveness for being deceitful and dishonest.
Yeah.
But see, there's this thing, and this is what apologetics does. Sometimes they call it the noble lie, right? They are putting out things for a greater purpose, which is to preach the gospel, to validate God, all this sort of stuff. That they think that sort of action excuses things that otherwise would be considered wrong. Because if he was having that kind of discussion, let's say with the Internal Revenue Service over his tax filings,
as some other creationists might have,
he might be in the Hovind camp of convicts. So so that's where I thought the second thing was the second part was disappointing. And if he's listening, I would say I be charitable and say that you know better, and for some reason you chose to make statements that would not pass, I think, peer review, let alone ethical review. So I'm a little bit disappointed in his part two behavior.
I think it'll get worse in part three.
I was not here for part two, but it almost seems like part two can be summed up as the Bible isn't wrong about everything. So it's right about everything that it is. Is it because the Bible isn't wrong about everything? Then you can believe everything the Bible says.
Or even so, they would say the Bible is the Word of God, and the Word of God is perfect. And so the Bible, if you interpret it correctly, you'll find the Bible to be correct. And the science has to catch up with the truth of the Bible is what he would.
All right, so I'm going to read out a super chat that came in, and then we're going to actually hit play on this. So the super chat that came in is from Eric Vierthaler 92, who said, question for all three of you. Could Godzilla or any organism that's similar to it, like Ghidorah, ever exist in real life, in today's world, or in the past? Would the atomic breath work too? And so my answer, from what I understand of biology and just, biomechanics, is certainly not at the size. Nothing about the gross anatomy of Godzilla is terribly extraordinary. Although he probably wouldn't be a reptile, he would probably actually be a synapsid that's fairly close to mammals, based on how he's portrayed, at least in the live-action Japanese material up until the most recent movie. But I don't see any mechanism where you would get a radiation-based breath weapon. Breath weapons are basically unheard of in the animal kingdom, and even the ones that have been proposed as being reasonably plausible, none of them involve ionizing radiation as the source of the energy. That just seems kind of crazy. So,
well, you got the. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the bombardier beetle does have a kind of atomization weapon, but it's a chemical reaction. It doesn't use ionized radiation.
Yeah. So
unless you could somehow have maybe some weird photoelectric effect, it'd be hard to imagine.
So my take is no.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for this is that that objects that critters that get larger critters grow their surface area by the square, but their volume by the cube.
Yeah.
And so their skeletal and muscular systems you just don't take an elephant and expand it 10 times and expect the elephant to be able to function, let alone stand up. Right.
It'll just collapse.
So and so that's one of the things is that as you get larger and larger, you have to go, because of the difference between the square law and of the surface and the cube law of the volume, and that mass will grow by the cube. You need a very different sort of system. With regards to the so-called ionizing radiation stuff, that's science fiction stuff. There's nothing, you can't really sit there and sort of channel radiation from your throat out there. If this thing was radioactive, it'd be radiating all over the place, and a little bit of body tissue. But I assume we could about beta and gamma, because alpha would stop. And then also that's not going to sit there. This ionizing radiation is not going to go and create sort of flame type things coming out. That's also kind of there. So
I suppose if it were high enough intensity, it could. Like if it just imparts that much kinetic energy.
But it superheats the atmosphere, maybe, or the air.
But that would be an explosion along a column, more like a lightning than a shouting out basically like a flamethrower gasoline type of thing. And that's the classic Godzilla stuff of basically having his mouth being a flamethrower, have that dragon type of thing.
Yeah.
So treat it as a cultural icon and as a nice science fiction thing. But the answer is sadly enough, no.
No, yeah.
To add on to the cube square thing, it's not just like being able to support the weight, but when you get so big, then you don't have enough. You lack the ability to transport oxygen, so it's just gonna suffocate.
Yeah, there's that problem too. Is how do you actually get oxygen from your lungs into the whole body when you have such a ridiculously labyrinthine and gigantic blood system? But real quick, I just want to say, Monk Mayfair asked if the original Godzilla in 1954 was linked to marine iguanas. No, the first real big link to marine iguanas is unfortunately in the American TriStar film of Godzilla starring Matthew Broderick. In the original 1954, Godzilla was simply said to have been an awoken and mutated survivor from the Mesozoic, which was listed as being like 3 million years ago, because apparently the makers of Godzilla had no idea when the Cretaceous period ended. And then for 199 from Dave Dalafiore, creationism. Jake from State Farm knows better. Yes, but we're gonna hit play now, and Jason Lyle's about to start going into the speed of light. Finally, I hope. So here we go.
It's not the answer in its current form. Okay, it might be leading to the right answer, but it's not the answer yet. We don't have a rigorous working model of that, although scientists continue to work on it. I think the answer may involve the one-way speed of light. I'm going to give you what I think is the answer. And it's,
he says may involve, okay.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, fair enough. He's not just going with, this is definitely it. Because we are at the point where now he's talking about the distant starlight problem, where if creationism is true, or young Earth creationism is true, how is it that we can see something that's billions of light years away? And he knows enough not to dispute the distance.
And I know this is a little bit of nit, but to use stupid units is very unscientific. I mean, 300,000 kilometers per second is a really nice round number. And to use miles, just I think is not very scientific.
It's not very scientific, but also I will say that his audience is not a bunch of scientists. It is a bunch of lay people in the United States. So I get why he's doing it.
Yeah. Well, but what if compelled to talk to somebody who's metrically challenged, I will give them metrics first, and then I will convert for them afterwards. But I do not use inches willingly. I do not use Fahrenheit willingly. I do not use pounds or stones or other grams or other stupid units willingly. I converted a metric back in 1972. And then due to a couple of stupid senators who thought that metrics was a communist plot, the U.S. remains a backwatered nation in its units.
But what about hogsheads to measure your mead?
Yes. Now, I love the esoterity of apothecary units and units relating to wheat and to cooking and so forth. I think they're fun. Just don't treat them as anything.
At least the unit of time is the same for both.
That's true. Yeah, second works in either system. That is a plus. All right, here we go.
Sense, but I think the evidence is compelling. The solution may involve what we call the one-way speed of light. This is a complex issue, so put your thinking caps on here. Physics is complicated, to say the least. The speed of light is 186,282 miles per second. It's fast, and we abbreviate that by the letter c, a lowercase c. But that is a round-trip average speed. And what I mean by that is you've measured the speed of light by having it travel in two directions and then taking an average. And so, for example, if we wanted to measure the speed of light, what we could do is we could get a really long hallway, a hallway that's 186,282 miles long. We'll pretend we have government funding so we can waste it that way.
Stop on there. This is another kind of cheap shot playing to his audience. It's attempted to have a joke,
we drink for that, by the way.
It's true.
Let's do that joke there. But I wonder if the doctor would make as glib of a joke about government spending by permitting churches to remain nonprofit status rather than being fully taxed, right?
I doubt it.
If I think he'd also probably be disingenuous. I think he's sitting there making an assumption of the political nature of his audience and trying to do a joke to it and not being consistent and applying that to, for example, fully taxing churches.
Yeah. And I
possibly, but maybe. It might just be that I think everyone is dissatisfied with at least some amount of what is spent on tax dollars, so anyone has something to complain about.
You know what? That is true. There are definitely things that I think the government is wasting money on. And
But he's not sitting there saying we should have a more efficient government. He's just throwing out this little canard for a joke.
yeah. All right. Well, let's see. So now we've got a government-funded hallway. Let's see what else we do with this funding.
And we'll put at one end of the hallway a flashlight and a clock, and at the other end we have a mirror. And at exactly noon, we turn on the flashlight for a split second, sending out the light pulse, and then what happens is that light pulse bounces off the mirror, comes back, and as soon as we see the reflection, we look at the clock. And you would find, if you did this, it would take 2 seconds. If the hallway were that long, that's how long it would take. It would take 2 seconds to do that every time. And so the total distance, which is 186,282 divided, well, times 2, because it has to go there and back, divided by the total time of 2.
We have for 199 from Dave Delafiore, let's carbon date a live seal. Yeah, have you heard that one, Landon?
No.
So Kent Hovind has this thing where he likes to try to discredit carbon dating by reporting that someone carbon dated material from a live seal, which, by the way, is a useless thing to do because carbon dating is supposed to be used on samples that are over 100 years old and that are dead. So there's that. But then it came back with an anomalously low age, but that's because of the marine reservoir effect. Animals that get the majority of their carbon from marine environments have unusually old carbon because of how carbon filters into the ocean over time. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's basically using a technique in an invalid situation that's double invalid. Because it wasn't the right time frame, and it was from an area that's known to not give reliable results with carbon dating. So it's a particularly stupid thing that Kent Hovind likes to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. So, by the way, we should drink to him because he actually is saying something that's correct.
Oh, that's true.
So
yeah,
far.
He is accurately describing how to do a light clock. So, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So, cheers.
Good job, Dr. Lisle.
You got some fundamentals down.
Yep.
Average speed of light. But it's an average speed because we don't know that light actually takes the same time to go out as it does back. It could be the case that the light actually zips out and then maybe it zips out instantaneously and takes all of 2 seconds to get back. Maybe the opposite. Maybe the light travels out very slowly and then zips back instantaneously. You see, we don't know. Either way, you get 2 seconds. Take a look. They're emitted at the same time, and the light returns at the same time. Either way, you get 2 seconds. Maybe it's the same speed. Maybe it's very different. And people say, well, why would it be different in different directions? I don't know. Why would it be the same?
It would be the same because that is the more parsimonious explanation. There's no detectable physical difference in light being emitted in one place and it being emitted in another place. You would have to propose a mechanism in order for that to be parsimonious. And it would have
not just that.
Yeah.
But you could also, instead of having a mirror and checking when it returns, you can have a photo detector at the end of the hallway.
But then you're going to get into
no, you can't.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't? Okay.
In fact, there's no known mechanism for doing a one-way measurement of light. The first thing is that you can't look at the time it's received because you don't know what the clock is.
Yeah.
And how that clock is relative to your clock.
Yeah. So one of the problems is there are ways to synchronize clocks, but all of them require that you assume a certain one-way speed of light in order to properly synchronize them. And unless you have that, you can't synchronize them. And so, yeah.
And moving clocks will change their rate. This is established by relativity.
Yeah.
And so
Drink
so you
from
can't.
Offer, by the way.
You go. Cheers. So yeah, the reason why the people do a round trip is that it requires one clock. The assumption is that the mirror is a nearly instantaneous reflection, or is a small enough amount of time for the reflection process versus the
travel time,
the transit time. So when we have something like the point reflectors that are placed on the surface of the moon by the Apollo astronauts, and we use like the Lick 60 kilowatt laser bouncing off of the 3 meter mirror to bounce off of that thing and back, the reflection time is relatively small compared with the 1.25 seconds up and 1.25 seconds back. So we measure the round trip time there. And trying to take a clock and even move it slowly to the other side, you're changing gravity well, you're changing other things, and you lose your synchronization due to relativity on the way back. And people have proposed a number of processes to try and do one-way light speeds in our experiments, but they in deeper analysis have shown that they're really doing a two-way average speed, not a one-way speed.
Now, my understanding is that when light is reflected off a mirror, it becomes polarized. That doesn't affect its speed, though, right?
No, I mean, and not necessarily polarized as well when it gets reflected off a mirror, but it does not. I mean, there is a transfer time for the photons interacting with the surface and the backscatter. There's also the fact that the surface is not a mathematical plane, but depth, and so there's actually spread of the light pulse as it goes into the mirror. Typically, even on astronomical mirrors that are front silvered or front aluminized, I should say, that the coating is very, very thin, but it's not non-zero length, and so some photons go into the lattice a bit and come back out and bounce around and come back out. So you end up getting this slight spread of the beam as it comes out. It makes it even harder.
So my big objection to this is like, okay, a photon being emitted from the surface of the mirror is essentially undergoing the same physical processes for emission and transfer as it is being emitted from your original light source, right? Photons being emitted from matter are photons being emitted from matter. If you want to propose that they, for some reason, have an anisotropic speed based on direction or what they were emitted from or something, you're going to have to explain to me why there's a difference in the physical process.
No.
Or I'm just going to say there's literally no reason to take this idea seriously.
And to be fair, and he is correct, that there's no reason why it would be, that isotropic, that is consistent in all places. It's just that the speed of the round trip speed of light is consistent regardless of your frame of reference and regardless of the direction, right? And that's what relativity says. Now, there's an assumption that the easiest and simplest explanation is that the light speed leaving the emitter is the same as the light speed coming back to the emitter, right? That's an assumption, and he is technically correct in saying that's just an assumption that cannot be.
Well, hey, let's
being honest.
Take a drink. It is an assumption.
Yeah.
But I also want to point out though that technically the light coming back isn't it has to have interacted with the matter, which means that matter essentially re-emitted it from a physical standpoint.
Yeah, like it.
Yeah.
So it's not that the light is coming back from a mirror to the emitter. The mirror is its own emitter. So
the reflection process is absorb and re-emission, reverse re-emission back.
So that's one of the problems that we have here is that why is it that your flashlight is a special emitter and the mirror isn't?
It's a salient example for laymen when it comes down to it.
Right, but that's one of the problems is that it introduces all of these weird things that there is no good reason to think are true, and that only work because they make one interpretation. Like, literally, if it weren't for his interpretation of the Bible, he would not at all be saying that there's an instantaneous one-way speed of light towards Earth.
Now, I understand in relativity, this issue of clock synchronization is something that's actually undergoing research. The consistency of the one-way speed given to the initial frame by special relativity is assumed, but I understand that the issues revolving around stuff. I mean, and there's attempts by people like Lorentz ether theory and so forth that have since been discarded have tried to come up with it, but these theories are not. These various theories are not. The various attempts to try to measure it actually measure attempts to do one-way light speed have shown to actually be not doing that. That
they're all actually measuring the round trip time.
they're effectively doing about a half of the round trip time.
Yeah.
Now you might sit there and say, sort of these various frames of reference. I mean, we call we call it the anisotropic synchrony convention. Is something that has been under research in relativity. There's no proof that's impossible, but generally speaking, it's hypothesized that it may not be possible to have a true one-way light speed because of the clock synchronization problem, because of relativity itself.
Yeah.
And to be able to measure that independently as you can a two-way speed.
Well, this is just maybe my own physics ignorance talking, but if you can't, because of the lack of synchronicity with the clocks, you can't really distinguish between whether it's instantaneous on the outgoing trip or the ingoing trip. So for all intents and purposes, like, it can't be.
Well, it could be.
Or he said it could be slow one way and fast the other way. And again, this is not that what he's proposing is understood in relativity. The equations are simpler when you have the isotropic speeds. But just because equations are simpler doesn't mean that's what actually happens, right? And there is sort of this Occam's razor thing, but understand that universe does not ask theory how to behave. It does what it does, and just because you have a mathematical model that seems simpler doesn't mean the universe is obeying that.
Right.
So here, this Occam's razor would be probably inappropriate to apply to say why would it be two-way. Now there are other issues we'll talk about, and we'll see what he says.
We'll see what happens.
That comes up, but just in terms of the normal trying to do the experiment, as odd as it seems, this anisotropic synchrony convention, something that Einstein talked about, he made an assumption in dividing his formula about light being that the two paths of the one way of the round trip are the same time. Now, if it turns out that they are asymmetric, the Einstein's theory still applies. The equations become more complicated. So that you can simplify the mathematics by having it be the same in both directions. But does that mean does that prove it? No.
No, it doesn't. All right, let's get a little bit more Landon in here. Lisle. We got lots of Landon in here. I'm sorry.
I
do this. I've done the same thing with Eric and Erica when I do Eric Hovland with Erica Gutsick-Gibbons. So yeah.
Right? That direction is not that direction. They're different. It could be different, and there are substances where the speed of light is very different in different directions. Maybe the universe is such a substance. The point is we don't know. And so we're going to have to do an experiment to find out, right?
True.
We're going to have to measure the one-way speed of
light. It is near vacuum, but it's not a not a perfect vacuum. But there are nonlinear things that change the propagation speed of light through the medium. Right now, the speed of light is still the speed of light, and in fact, if you look down at the atomic level, you would see you would quote see, pun intended, photons zipping from one bit of matter reaction to the next at c. We presume. Now,
are you referring to like instances where like you get Cherenkov radiation, or?
Well, that's one example, but refraction, right? The fact that light bends going into denser medium, light passes through something like water or glass at a speed. The light propagates through that medium slower than c. Right. But if you look at what's happening, there are c jumps between let's say, blocks of matter.
Right. It's another absorption re-emission phenomenon, like reflection is, because photons are always going at c, but they sometimes have interactions, and those interactions take time.
Kind of like with a prism, where the different energy level, like not all the photons are at the same energy level, so not being re-emitted at the same rate. So that's why the light rays, it seems to split.
Yeah, because of the index refraction, you have these wave fronts coming through, and the wave fronts begin to disperse because they hit the plane. Let's say they hit it at an angle, and you can imagine a marching band going across a field, and they're drum majors having them step, right, and all of a sudden somewhere up in the field is a muddy patch where their stepping doesn't allow them to move as fast. And so that line that would be propagating across the field hits the muddy patch and begins to bend as due to the speed of the wave in the medium, right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about the light being slower than c. Lights is speed of light.
So I have a question.
Everywhere.
I want to.
It really is propagation of the wave.
I want to quickly address a question, and we're going to get a little bit more of the video in. And this is from This World and Beyond. It says, I have an honest question. How do we know relatedness between quite closely related animals without using genetics? How do we know that humans are closer to pan than gorilla? Basically, there are two ways that we get our evolutionary tree, if you will. One is the character-based thing, where we actually have we get a set of character traits, like, okay, is there a occipital bun, or is there like, what's our tooth count, what's the shape of the molars, what's the ratio of like first digit or first phalange in like digit 3 to the last one or something, just as many as you can, and then you can do a statistical analysis to see which trees are most likely. And that's one direction. So, for instance, if you were to do, say, hominoidea, so you're getting all the apes in, the great and lesser apes. I don't know all of the character traits that would be used in that, because I'm not big on primatology. So I can't say exactly which traits would unite them, but you would run a statistical analysis on that. And it's the same thing that you would do with genetics, basically, except instead of using gross anatomical features, you would be using the genotype of the organisms. And one of the things is that those two things can cross-check each other. They tend to converge on the same answer far more often than they diverge. So while I don't know specifically for, say, pan, gorilla, and humans, which are themselves a group, they're more closely related to, all those are more closely related to each other than they are to, say, genus Pongo, which is the orangutan species. Yeah. So
maybe we should have these kind of questions.
Yeah, towards maybe the end.
Towards the end of there, but not to say what Lisle is proposing. Again, it's scientifically, in order to say that we have not been able to devise a correct experiment to correctly measure the one-way speed of light. Everything that we've done so far has turned out to be essentially a two-way speed, or effectively the same as a two-way speed.
Yeah.
And because you can't measure the going and coming speed independently, you don't know that they're equal. Assuming they're equal is as bad of an assumption as Lisle saying, well, God is great, the universe is great, therefore God made it. That's as bad of a logic assumption as to say, well, it's simpler that way. Yes, Maxwell's equations can work if you have the asymmetric speed. Now, it'd be interesting to say, well, if they're not the same, why are they not the same, and what determines whether they're
See, that's my problem with the anisotropic assumption, is that there's got to be a reason for it, and I can't even imagine what it would be.
Well, I mean, going further, why are you assuming the speed is constant throughout the thing? What if it has a sinusoidal speed and it just averages out over the one trip?
Yeah, that's also a valid one. But let's get some more of this in here. We'll see
we can figure out that you could use all that with the two-way speeds, but that's another
of light.
Yeah, okay.
How would you do that? Well, you'd need two clocks. Can't use a mirror because we just want a one-way trip this time. So we're going to put one clock at that end, one clock at that end. We'll send out the light pulse. Let's say when this clock is at noon, we send out the light pulse, and then when it hits this other clock, we read the time. Right? And you're thinking, yeah, it'll be 1 second. Yes? Well, I tried this in my office. I don't have a long hallway. We're a ministry. We don't get government funding. So
actually,
when my
stop.
watch hit noon.
Stop. He does get government subsidies because he's a religion and they take advantage of all of the, I think, unconstitutional tax breaks given to churches. He is subsidized by the taxpayers, and it's disingenuous for him to go and tweak the government on one side and then gladly pull in all of the tax benefits on the other side. The taxpayers do fund him, I believe, unconstitutionally. And if I were on the court, I would declare invalid giving churches tax-free status based upon the First Amendment.
I don't have a comment on the politics.
And the 14th Amendment. But he's being disingenuous. And that joke is, I think, in poor taste. Shame on him. If he was going to his principles, he would say, we want to be, we do not want to have anything with the government, and so we will refuse all the tax breaks. We will pay taxes just like any other taxpayer. But no, he's.
Well, political discussion aside, he did make a joke, and it was a bad one, so we should drink.
Yes, I agree.
I suppose.
There you go.
I turned on the flashlight, and there's a phone over there. There's a clock over by my phone, and right at noon, and I looked, and as soon as I saw the light on the clock there, it read 12:05, and I said, it takes 5 minutes for the light to get from my watch to the clock. You're not buying that, huh?
That was another joke. We'll drink for that real quick.
Okay.
I assumed that the two clocks were synchronized, right? In other words, the clock by my phone is obviously 5 minutes faster than the clock on my watch. The two clocks have to read the same time at the same time. They have to be synchronized. No problem. We'll make sure the two clocks are synchronized. Turns out that's really hard to do. Two clocks that are separated by a distance. In fact, you cannot do it exactly. And I'll show you why. Now, you might think, well, I've got a clock that synchronizes itself. In fact, this watch actually receives a signal from Fort Collins, Colorado, and it synchronizes it to the atomic clock in Boulder. It does that every night, so I never have to set it. It's really neat. But so that's what we'll do, right? We'll put a radio transmitter at one of those clocks, and when the clock strikes noon, we'll send out the radio pulse to the other clock, yes, and then we'll set it to noon. But there's a problem, because the radio pulse, even though it's fast, it takes a little bit of time for the radio to get from one clock to the other. So if you just did that, it would be just a little bit behind. My clock is
We're getting accurate information so far. I'm going to take a drink so far.
In a second, I don't worry about it. But here we got to do it exactly if we're going to measure the speed of light. Now we could compensate for that if we could set this clock a little bit forward if we knew how long it took the radio pulse to get there. How fast does radio travel? It travels at the speed of light. We know that because if you turn on a radio transmitter and a light pulse,
was that a joke?
At the same time. We
It
know
didn't feel like a joke, but people laughed.
We know that. But you see, the one-way speed of
Maybe
light is
they
the very
felt
thing we're
like
trying
it
to measure.
was a joke
That's
and
the thing
laughed
we don't
out of
know.
reflex.
I don't know.
So you can't do it that way. Now, some people have for some reason thought the problem would be solved if you put the radio transmitter in the middle. They say that way you send out the beam, and then they're set to the same time, and it doesn't matter what the delay is. Pretty clever, except that assumes that the radio pulse and therefore light travels the same speed that way as it does that way, doesn't it? If light and therefore radio travels at a different speed, then that clock's set to noon first, and then that clock's set to noon second. See, so putting the radio transmitter in the middle doesn't solve the problem.
That's also accurate. It doesn't solve the problem. I'll take the drink.
It's all dependent on the speed of light anyway.
Another drink.
There's one other thing we might try, and that is we'll take the two clocks, put them in the same place, and synchronize them. That we can do. And then we'll move one of the clocks, or both of them, to the opposite ends of the hallway. Should work, right? Because they're definitely synchronized when they're together. We can see that they read the same time at the same time. But there's a problem, because according to Einstein, motion affects the passage of time. The very act of moving the clock causes it to become desynchronized from the other one. Isn't that interesting? Now there's an equation
take a
that
drink
tells
for
you
more
how
rightness.
much it's desynchronized, and so then
He's
you
on
adjust
he's
it.
on a hot streak.
But guess what's in that?
Yeah, so I think the thing is, because ultimately he's not wrong that the isotropy of the speed of light is just an assumption, he gets to be very accurate about the science here in an effort to basically, I know where this is ultimately going, I don't know how far we're going to get there, but eventually he's basically going to say, why don't we just assume that light travels from distant galaxies instantaneously to Earth?
Yeah, but as I say, it's interesting that he's trying to be precise here when he was being disingenuous in part 2.
Well,
So-
here he gets to be precise because technically he's not wrong about the issue.
That's correct. So
So-
far, everything is fine
Yeah.
so far. So
Well, I mean, that's kind of the nature of apologetics. You're going to be as precise as you can get away with, and then everything else you can just kind of fill with whatever kind of.
Yeah, that's certainly very characteristic of younger creationism. Sometimes they can be extremely accurate when it helps, but when it hurts, you get a little bit more fudgy.
That equation, the speed of light. Yeah, the very thing we don't know. Apparently, you can't do it. And by the way, don't come up to me and say, I've thought of some way by which you could measure the one-way speed of light, unless you've read 10 papers on the topic. Because physicists have been trying to figure this out for 100 years, and nobody's been able to do it.
That's also accurate. I'll take a
So I
turn for
want
that
to make
too.
sure you're familiar with literature, because everything you can think of, I guarantee
I think
you
that might be an
it's been
undersaw. I
tried,
think it's
and
been
it
more than
doesn't
100.
work. There's some catch you haven't thought of. It's like perpetual motion machine. Apparently, it is impossible to synchronize 2 clocks at a distance without knowing the one-way speed of light.
by the way, I
And,
appreciate the
of
fact
course,
he
you
says
can't measure the
apparent.
one-way speed of
I appreciate the fact he says apparently, right?
Yeah.
That is correct, right?
Yeah.
It's not been proven, but apparently it is, and all attempts to do it are there. So again, it's interesting that he is asymmetric in his
His accuracy.
part 2 stuff
Yeah.
versus this part 3 stuff.
Well, even his part 1 stuff wasn't like terribly
It was
inaccurate. It was just a weird argument.
His part 1 wasn't an argument. It wasn't even wrong.
Yeah,
Right?
it was just ooh.
Ooh, universe.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Like
big.
it was just a
Ooh,
non
pretty
sequitur.
pictures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically, it was the universe is awesome, therefore God. But there was no real attempt to make that logical thing. Also, by the way, I'm only seeing 13 likes. We got 35 people in here in the chat, guys. Come on, help me out.
Come on. Get a little of that thumbs up thing.
Yeah. So here we go.
light unless you have 2 synchronized clocks at a distance. Okay, it's a catch-22, as it were. There is no way to measure the one-way speed of light. Can't be done. So what does that leave us with? If it can never be measured, the best we can do is pick what we want it to be and stick with it. And that's exactly what physicists have done. We've decided we like it to be the same in all directions because it makes the math easier.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you
Take a
don't have to
drink.
pick that.
That's
If you
correct.
pick it different directions, that'll work just as well. And so what we do is we say, well, we're going to decide it to be the same, and that's how we'll synchronize clocks, okay? And so when the lightning bolt strikes, the light goes out from it, and when the clocks see the light, they're set to noon. And we're going to call that synchronized. You can do that. And if you measure the one-way speed of light, you'll find, using this system, you'll find that it's the same in all directions. But if you assume it's different in different directions, and you synchronize your clocks that way, and you go about your one-way speed of light measurement, you'll find it's different in different directions. Whatever you pick, your experiment will confirm. And so you see, it's a convention, like driving on the right
That's
side of the
true.
road. It's something
So-
we all agree to it, and it
Yep,
works.
yeah.
Yep.
But you can
Agree.
pick
True.
another convention. You can go to Australia, and they drive on the left side of the road, and that works just as well. That light requires the same time to traverse the path A to M as for the path B to M is in reality neither a supposition nor a hypothesis about the physical nature of light, but a stipulation which I can make of my own free will in order to arrive at a definition of simultaneity. It's something we get to pick out of our own free will. And that was something that was recognized by Albert Einstein. Einstein knew that you can't measure the one-way speed of light.
That's true, but it was
It's
a
something
quote,
that
so
you
it
get to
doesn't count as a
choose.
drink.
And
That's true.
we've seen that confirmed many times since. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose this convention. We're going to call it the Anisotropic Synchrony Convention. Anisotropic means different in different directions. So I'm going to let the speed of light be infinite when it's moving toward me, and half c when it's moving away. Because the round trip speed is set by God. You can't change that. That's 186,000 miles per second.
That's
So if it's
okay.
infinity toward me,
Stop
and it's
there.
half-
That set by God is an assumption. So
It does assume that God set up the universe.
I mean, this is part of this presuppositionalist and insert bad word that that various people insert the person who I've criticized over and over for being the master presuppositionalist. It is a really I think, poor look at logic. Basically, what he's saying is, I assume that God exists, therefore I'm going to turn around and based upon that, everything else follows. Anything that contradicts it must be wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because he presumes that God exists. So,
Well, he specifically presumed that the round trip speed of light was set by God. I don't think that assumption really changes anything of material.
So
here.
for me, for this channel, I have personal opinions about the why you may or may not want to assume that. But for the purposes of this channel, if you want to just say that God is the one who established the rules by which the universe will operate, I don't super care, because I've yet to find an area where that matters for the science, and that's what I'm here for. So if God declared that the round trip speed of light is going to be, c, okay, that's fine. Like, now what? What do we do with that information?
if he said, well, the speed of light is set, and as us Christians we believe that was set by God, he would be factually correct.
That would be more accurate.
But what he just said is not defensible, right? It is merely,
yeah.
So, all right, we'll get a little bit more in.
Half C away from me, that averages out. People wonder why you average infinity with a half C and get C, but it's because it's a time average, and it takes no time for the light to get here. But in any case, that's the way it works out. Now, when it's in other directions, it'll have different speeds. Now, why would I pick this convention? There's two reasons. One of them is because this is the way all ancient cultures implicitly did it, because they did not subtract off light travel time, because they didn't know what the round trip speed of light was anyway. When you see something, that's when it happens. If you use this convention...
No, I'm going to take a drink.
That seems incorrect.
Yeah, here's the problem. It's not that they assumed an anisotropic speed of light. It's that they had no way to conceptualize a speed of light because they had no effective measurement mechanisms, and even if they had come up with experiments to measure it, it is fast enough that they could not have gotten a meaningful answer. So it's not that they assumed your convention there, Dr. Lisle. They didn't have an idea about the speed of light to have conventions about.
If I recall correctly, many ancient cultures thought the light was emitted by the object in a one-way fashion. They didn't actually assume a round trip.
There were a lot of various ideas, and of course, one thing that comes up is what do we mean by ancient? Because by the time we get to say what in Europe would be the medieval period, at that point, a lot of people in the Middle East had been doing work in optics that had shown that light was behaving in a wave-like way, and therefore would presumably had to propagate, which presumably would take time. So by that point, we were getting some people with the kind of an inkling that there might be some kind of travel time for light, but they have no way to really, at this point, still conceptualize what the speed of light means for physics and about things like about anisotropy. And at that point, I would actually argue that if you had asked them, like if you had gone to one of these Arabs doing all this work in optics in the 14th or century or something, do you think that the speed of light is anisotropic? They probably would have said no. It doesn't seem like, why would it be?
I do recall it was in one of the episodes of the New Cosmos show where it was in the Arab world back during their scientific revolution. I can't remember the name of the individual, but he was he through their conventions, he disrupted them kind of, by suggesting that light is emitted and then it reflected off, say, the moon, and then comes back to our eyes, and then you're actually measuring a round trip kind of thing. But he lacked the tools to measure it well.
Well, yeah, that's one of the problems, is that when you're talking about ancient cultures, basically until the 19th century, it was impossible to get any tools good enough to measure the speed of light in any meaningful way, no matter whether you were doing an isotropic or anisotropic convention. It doesn't matter. All of the tools you had would have returned 0 as their answer, or 0 would have been within the margin of error.
Right.
So it's a silly thing to say, and that's why I took a drink for it, because Jason Lisle is mangling the history of science.
When you see something, that's when it happens. Isn't that neat? Second reason is it solves...
Well, it's when it happens for you. It doesn't answer the question, but okay.
This Starlight problem. I think that's a pretty good reason. So,
Wait,
under
that
the
is not a good
anisotropic
reason.
synchrony
No, that is an extremely bad reason. That it is convenient for my a priori conclusion or assumption, actually, is a really
part of
bad
it.
reason.
Part of this presuppositionalist insert bad word because
You can say
they
BS, Landon, if you want. You can just use the letters.
okay the
Presuppositionalist BS.
Fubar.
We could abbreviate it the PSBS.
Oh, yeah, I kind of like that. But yeah. So sorry, keep going, Landon.
No, I say so. So it's a thing that again, but he's preaching to the choir, so he doesn't really care
Right.
that he's doing this.
Yeah. So I would actually go ahead and say that is the worst reason to assume that convention that you could possibly imagine. But
convention, light takes no time at all to get from distant galaxies to here because of the way we've chosen to synchronize clocks. It's not a problem. So the distant starlight problem is solved if the Bible uses this convention. And in my opinion, that's the only thing that is really uncertain. And I don't think it's all that uncertain, but if there's a weak link in my argument, this is it. I'm proposing that the Bible uses this anisotropic synchrony convention because that was the ancient way of doing it. Okay.
So because it wasn't the ancient way of doing it, because we cannot define an isotropy or anisotropy convention for ancient cultures, and because it makes one problem amongst a myriad of problems for young Earth creationism go away if you make an unreasonable assumption about anisotropy and the speed of light, then you're going to go for it. I'm going to take a drink because that is just stupid, compounded on stupid.
Well,
Yeah.
I calling it an unreasonable assumption is not, I don't think, fair. It's not any more reasonable than any other assumption.
Well, no, because he's making the assumption for silly reasons.
Right, that's true.
He's making the assumption to justify his otherwise unjustifiable beliefs. And that is not a good reason to do that. And here's another thing. One of the problems, actually, and one of the ways that I would say we have some reason to think that the speed of light is, in fact, isotropic, is that when you look far out into the universe, what we see actually matches models for the development of the universe in terms of the Big Bang that were predicted before the observations were made. So when you look far away, the universe looks younger. Now, it's hard to come up with a reason why that would be, except that the speed of light is more or less isotropic.
Right.
And that you're actually looking at the universe as it was,
Now,
whatever, 10 billion years ago.
I do have, like, as we were going through the various experiments, a particular experiment came to my head, and it's very likely the same problem, has the same problem as every other one, but I guess I'd like to propose it to people who understand the situation a little better. Is, what if you had a single clock and you had a photo detector at one end and on the other, and then it looked at the comparison of the signals when the light hit each of them, and then it adjusted the clock. Like, that may have already been done. I don't know.
The problem is that it still requires you to synchronize clocks, and you can't synchronize the clocks without a convention. And the convention you pick will automatically be confirmed by the experiment because it's the convention you use to synchronize the clocks.
You get this. I mean, you get presuppositional circular logic if you do that. Unfortunately,
yeah.
I guess I'm misunderstanding the situation, because in this experiment there's only one clock.
Well, okay, so describe it to me again. Maybe I misheard you.
So there's two photo detectors, one on each end, and then there's a single clock that goes, and then there's an offset based on the signal from the second.
Well, you would still need to use, in order to get the offset from the second signal, you would have to assume a speed of light in that direction.
That's true. Yeah,
So.
I guess. Yeah, you'd have to assume both speeds of light, huh? Actually, it's actually a really bad
So
experiment.
as long as the anisotropy is mirrored in both directions, you get to still give an anisotropic one-way speed of light in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately, look, Lisle wasn't wrong to say that unless you've read quite a few papers on this, if you think you've come up with something, you probably haven't, because all the simple options have already been exhausted. But
or they can't be exhausted.
Yeah. So here we go.
And I think it's implied in Scripture as well, because the Bible says, God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Yes? And we find that those are the sun, the moon, the stars also in verse 16. It says, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. So one of the purposes of the stars was to produce light that falls on the earth. And it says, and it was so. What was so? God made the lights, and their light fell upon the earth, you see. And so it seems to me the Bible is suggesting, and this is an inference on my part, but it seems to me the Bible is suggesting that God made the stars and their light fell on the earth right away. Which is
By the way, I will give him credit. We should drink to this.
Okay.
They said this is an inference on his part. So this is one of the few times that he seems to be honest about his apologetics. And I would, if he were doing this in a debate, I'd jump in and say, congratulations for being honest about it. Why weren't you honest for the last
Right.
two parts in saying such things?
Of course, I would also point
Emperor's
out
Name.
that because the Bible describes the stars being as part of a firmament, what it's actually describing is not so much the one-way speed of light as the stars stuck in a dome above the earth. Because if we're going to be literal about Genesis, we got to be literal about it. So I'm actually also going to drink for him being stupid as well as drink for him being not right. So yeah, we got a double one there.
He's right for the wrong reasons.
Basically, yeah. Because one of the things I like to hammer home is, like, I don't think that the Bible's point is to teach a flat earth cosmology, but it does assume one, at least in Genesis and throughout most of the Old Testament. I actually don't think it assumes that in the New Testament, and all of the things that I've seen from people trying to argue that the New Testament is assuming a flat earth, I have found extremely unconvincing. I actually think that the New Testament authors were probably accepted the spherical nature of the earth, so...
Well, by then, people had around the world had figured out that the Earth was round.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically common knowledge all throughout the Roman Empire that the Earth was round. And you can say, oh, but what about the thing where, you know, Satan takes Jesus up onto a mountaintop? And the thing is that all of the earliest commentaries we have from that is not that the mountaintop is what made it physically possible for Jesus to gain line of sight, so much as it was an impressive place to be given visions of the various countries around the world. Which
it also may not have been a literal mountaintop, but just...
Well, he was already on a mountain, so... At least in the nature of the narrative. I'm not commenting on its accuracy. I'm just saying the internal logic, I don't think, assumes a flat Earth in that story. But hey, we'll keep going.
the Anisotropic Synchrony convention. And so I think that scriptures at least suggest that. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's a very plausible solution to distant starlight. In any case, the critic would have to argue that he knows the Bible's using Einstein's synchrony convention, and therefore, in order for there to be a problem. And I think that's going to be
actually, I do kind of agree with him there, so I'll take a drink for it.
No.
That would
so
have to
we've
be an
seen that
assumption.
the Bible is right when it speaks about the glory of God being revealed in the heavens. The
Well,
Bible's
stop.
right when it talks about the
Stop for a moment. Stop. So this is back to his stuff. We're on the Starlight. So part one was glory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty pictures, big universe, glory to God. And he wasn't even, that statements weren't even wrong, right? They were just
Right. If it's impressive and that makes you want to praise God, I'm not going to complain about it, but it doesn't prove anything.
But it is a waste of time from the debate over what the universe is. The basic age and Earth, we're spending time with this circular logic and presuppositionalist FUBAR logic that is that he was I think unethic in his Christian context, unethically proposing.
Yeah.
And that he's capable of doing what he did before, saying assumption on my part, which he chose not to do those things.
Right.
And so under his system, I believe that is a sin, and that he should ask God for forgiveness for those three things. But he somehow does it for the Starlight thing
and,
when he's trying to be.
And I would argue that it's unethical under almost any system of ethics that you can think of. I would have trouble finding a system of ethics, whether it be religious or not, that would say that what he did was appropriate there. And one of the other things is, even if we say that the rather unlikely assumption that Earth is just the center of isotropic speed of light for some reason, I guess because God declared it to be so. Even if we assume that that solves the Starlight problem, it doesn't actually get young Earth creationism, because we still know that at least the solar system is significantly older than young Earth creationism can allow for. And since we also have very good reason to assume that it exists in an even older universe, just based on its own composition, because we actually have good reason to think that the matter making up the solar system actually resulted from at least 2 different stars going nova and or supernova. So we actually have good reason to think that the universe predates the solar system, independent of the light speed travel time.
Well, not just that, but like the work of Claire Patterson showed that the physical age of the Earth is 4.5 billion years.
Right. So you have not fixed any problem by... Okay, you fixed one problem by making this somewhat... well, actually, I would just say very unreasonable assumption, because you only made it because it helped fix this problem for you. But even if we just let that go and say, yep, that's the solution, it's not a reasonable thing to then conclude that the age of the Earth is 6,000 years old, because it just can't be, even without this problem. But let's see what else he's got. He's only got a few more minutes.
Okay.
So I think we actually will probably be able to get through this video, and then we can go on to some astronomy news and stuff and get some questions.
The basics of astronomy. It's right when it talks about the age of the universe. It's right when it talks about the uniqueness of the Earth. And it's right when it talks about distant starlight. There's not a problem. And folks, we need to know this information, because there are people that are right now on their way to hell because they are convinced that the Bible's been disproved scientifically.
Well,
And
parts
we need
of
to
it
get
have.
this information in our heads so that we can defend the Word of God effectively. And that's what we're all about here at the Institute.
Defend the Word of God, right? That is His God, and His epistemological logic and His apologetics are so fragile, so based upon logical quicksand and other presuppositionalist and apologetic foobar, that they need a taxpayer subsidized institution like this religious cult they have of creationist research to defend their stuff, right? If their Bible, if their God, if their apologetics were so self-evident, they could stand on their own. But no, they need to create a organization that makes use of taxpayer-funded subsidies in order to defend their thing, because otherwise, indefensible would be even more mocked.
Well, I will say, I do spend a lot of my time defending things that I think are, in fact, pretty obviously self-evident. So, I don't know. I feel like I'm being much more honest about it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I am defending things like science from attacks from without, from people like Jason Lisle. So, I would say the bare fact that there is defense to be done is not great, but I think one of the problems is that, I will say this, at least Jason Lisle's interpretation of the Bible is so absurdly incompatible with reality that, yes, the fact that they have to do all this funding and dishonest defenses of it is it's telling, to say the least.
Yeah, and so in a debate where if the forum were allowed to back and forth, I would sit there saying, not only you're being disingenuous, you're being downright offensive, and shame on you for having said that, right?
And I'm going to have to go ahead and add that my drink is now mostly just melted ice, so I think we're going to take a quick intermission. When we come back, we will finish up this video, and then I think we can get into some astronomy news, some Q&A, because, you know, if you've got questions about astronomy, there's a fair chance that Landon has answers. And that also goes for math, too, because, Landon, didn't you spend some of your free time recently discovering the newest, biggest Messier prime or something like that?
Oh, I tell you, I haven't done that since the Mersenne prime has been done that since
Mersenne prime, yeah.
1979.
Oh, okay.
But there are other primes.
You've recently found a new prime, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a nice little
Okay,
form
so
of stuff. It was one of those largest known of its kind. But that was consecutive odd numbers. But that's a
okay.
But back to, and we can talk about that later. But back to what Lisle is doing. in a debate, I would shame him from his own context, and say, in your theology, you have sinned, and you better go to your God for forgiveness, or better bow and get on your knees and pray away your sin, even though it's been redeemed in your Protestant thing, because again you have been I think deliberately loose with the truth, right?
Okay.
You're saying things for the purpose of having an effect on your audience and for the effect on your position, which I think is disgusting.
I just had an idea. Normally during an intermission, I play my intermission video. But, Landon, would you be willing to take questions from the audience while I go grab myself a refresh drink?
Let's go get to guys for audience.
Guys, give some questions. I'm going to be back in a few minutes. Like I said, Landon here knows a lot about a lot. So, ask him questions, and I'm going to be right back.
I'm going to step away and get a non-tea drink as well.
All right. And please mute before you head up.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk about there. So someone says amen, or a women. Again, Dapper Dino points. I have 3 left over the previous interaction at Dapper. How can these points be redeemed? I don't know. Are they like cereal box tops where if you collect enough, you can corner the market? Like the was it Blocking Bullwinkle, where they had the real economy was on cereal box tops, and there was Boris bought enough, and his wife Natasha was or I think his wife. Was Boris and Natasha, were they married, or are they just co-spies? I don't know. Thanks. What is the best sci-fi spacecraft? I like some of the spacecraft that was described in the Foundation series by Asimov. Are there? You talk about literature. You talk about movies. I prefer some of the Star Trek movies there, but literature-wise, I should say so naughty T and he. Hey Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of a hat. Yes, okay. So hey Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of a hat. But of course it's and then Rocky would say that trick never works. Then Bullock would do something, and he had an effect, and he would say something. So challenge to the audience: when Bullock would fail to pull a rabbit out of a hat, what was excuses? What were the various excuses he gave? And there's at least 5 of their excuses. They're doing a Foundation TV show. I hope they do a good job. Foundation series by Asimov, I think is there. All right. I heard Godzilla, so drink. We're going to drink a little bit of the wine here.
Uh-huh. Oh, there we go.
Let's see. For everybody, if you can have a mom. They did a good job of Stargate. Yeah, I like science fiction that explores the, if you will, the social aspects of something. You ignore the premise, right? If a science fiction system says this is a given, almost presuppositions, of the plot, and let's explore the personal consequences. I think that's when science fiction often is written in its best. Bullwick on Walking Bullwick were in my audience. I'm glad my parents introduced me to that. Yeah, although it's 1 prime. Actually, no, 1 is not prime. 1 is neither prime nor composite. Now, you might say, why? And the answer is by convention. What do you mean by convention? Well, we have a definition for prime, and the definition of prime does not include 1 being prime. The last, I think, professional or world-class mathematician that considered 1 to be prime, died in the early 1900s. There was only a period of time, a couple of centuries, where people considered that 1 might be considered prime, but more modern definitions, as well as ancient definitions, 1 was not prime.
All right, I am back. So let's get through the
question. Miss
question.
Hey, God's Daughter, by the way, and God's Daughter is actually a class winemaker I've had the pleasure of 2 excellent wines by God's Letter. I mean, they're like 4.5-star wines, and plus he has a cider called Math is Hard cider that is also excellent. And I'm looking forward to when he comes out with another creation to sample this up. But for God's Auditor, Costa Brown, I'm doing Costa Brown, Gracie Vendor's 2016 Pinot Noir from Anderson Valley. This is you can look this up. This is a fairly rare wine bottle, but worth drinking and enjoying.
Landon, do you remember when 2016 was what everyone thought was going to be the worst year? how wrong they were. Yeah.
I don't know. I think people tell me that 1963, 62, 63 is the worst year, and 74 was the worst year, and
that's because they didn't go through 66 million BC.
There you go.
Yeah. See, I've experienced far worse years than you guys can even imagine. But have we gone through? Real quick, I want to say, have we gone through the questions that have been asked so far?
I missed because we went off on rock and roll with repentance, that sort of thing. But I think so.
Okay, well, I'll say if there were questions that you asked here and they didn't get answered, we'll probably have plenty of Q&A time, maybe even like up to like a half an hour or so at the end.
Yeah.
Also, Dapper Dino, do you and Legs want to say what your favorite sci-fi spacecraft are? That's something I think I might save for like the Top Hats off stream, which is probably going to happen because I'm not so drunk as to not be open to doing some gaming on Top Hats Off. So that means go subscribe to Top Hats Off and come hang out. And sometimes I do art streams there, and it's where I do my gaming stuff. It's also where my my audiobook version of Dracula is being slowly uploaded. We got 3 chapters, and then I'm going to do the 4th chapter, and then Manya, Golden Unicorn, is going to be doing the next chapter after that. So she's going to be reading that chapter. So
yes, and so a couple of things that say that I like, the Math is Hard cider. Yes, that's the name that God's Auditor had for this cider.
Drink for Godzilla.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, I'm no longer drinking tea, by the way.
Oh, what are you drinking?
Sailor Jerry's and Coke.
All right. Oh man. All right.
Yeah,
Let's...
and so that sort of is God's Auditor can tell you about the thing, but I think there was a miscalculation that ended up making the cider accelerated, but also it's really good.
Okay.
Some of these ultra hard ciders are really just about his stuff goes good. And then finally, I guess we said something like there was another question, or was that it?
They can ask it again.
Okay.
I just want to say about super hard ciders. A friend of mine who is a farmer who runs a cancer research lab in Uganda and who is an Eastern Orthodox deacon, so he wears many hats, sometimes literally. He made a pear cider, and he decided it wasn't fizzy enough, so he added extra sugar. And instead of becoming extra fizzy, it just got really, really hard. And but because not all the sugar gets consumed, it was actually still on the sweet side, so you didn't really notice how hard it was. And I had a few bottles of that, and I was like, "Oh my, this is not what I was expecting from this pear cider." So okay, we'll get some more astronomy in here.
Creation research.
Yep.
We really want people to be saved, and we're not bashful about that. We're different than the ID movement. Leaves out the creator, and they have a strategy for that. I understand why they do that, but we want people to be saved.
He's
We're
admitting
very happy
that
to tell people.
He's basically just admitting that the Discovery Institute is being dishonest for strategic purposes. I just want to acknowledge that.
Yes.
He's right about it, so I'm going to drink for it.
All right.
And that's why we produce these resources. Let me show you some of the resources we have here at the conference. I've got a book called Taking Back Astronomy, which covers the information that I just covered, basically. And it goes into some things that I didn't have time to hit today. And it's beautifully illustrated. It's got some of these wonderful Hubble images in it. And I think that's one of the ways
God must have made
the
that book
universe declares God's glory.
Yep.
So I'd encourage you to get that. It makes a really persuasive case. It's not a thick book, but it makes a very persuasive case.
All right, is he just going to shill from now on?
When it touches on astronomy. And therefore,
we'll see.
Trusted in other issues as well. My latest book on astronomy, The Stargazer's Guide to the Night Sky. And I think that's the
let's see what this is. And he might.
Well,
come back.
I just skipped ahead 10 seconds just to see if he's going to come back.
Is he going to pass around a collection plate?
Yeah, because I can tell this is still about his the whatever his guide to the night sky. I mean, I don't think he's going to literally pass around a collection plate, but I guarantee you he has a back table where these books are for sale.
Oh, sure.
To know the creator of the night sky. And this book's going to show you how to find the various objects that we looked at. A lot of those you can see in a small telescope if you know where to
Okay,
look.
Jason.
Some of them you can see with your just with your naked eye. It'll show you how to fucking see binoculars. You can see Saturn.
Yes,
and
you
this
can
book
see
will show you how to do that.
Venus,
if you thought, well, I'd like to get a telescope, but I don't know what kind. Well, this book will tell you about different kinds. It's a great book. And so I hope that you'll hope you'll take a look at that. The ultimate proof
Another
of creation.
book. Okay, you're shilling again.
Ministry. The Pharisees and Sadducees would come to him, trying to trip him up, trying to trick him, and his answer was just so perfect. He just turned around on them, and then they didn't know what to say. Wouldn't you like to learn to think like that? You can.
To be
and this book really is
rhetorically effective, regardless of how
and
right
this
you
book
are.
is really going to train you how to think biblically, how to think.
It's actually a fair point that if you read the narrative of the Gospels, Jesus comes across as a clever guy. I'm not going to dispute it. There's no way to dispute that. He comes across as a clever guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Logically, as it were. Check us out as well, our website, icr.org.
Yeah, it's just,
and our new website that we're
there's
just
only
launching.
seconds
It's still
left.
very
It's just shilling from that point on.
youroriginsmatter.com. And that's a great way that you can participate in this conversation.
Well, see,
thank you
go to
very
the bitter
much.
end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's the applause, and he's walking off. All right.
So,
So let's get rid of Jason here.
I almost want to go to one of these talks and do what I did one time, where I was like, if you really want to know about your origins, talkorigins.org is an amazing source.
I was there with you for that.
Yeah.
We found out. So Landon, Sphincter of Doom here and I found out that there was going to be a creationist conference at a church near where we were living at the time. And so we just showed up, and we brought another friend of ours, and she won the lottery, the door prize lottery. So she got some free creation.
Both you and her won the 2 door prizes.
That's right. So both of their creationist literature door prizes went to people who were completely unsympathetic, which was fun. And then afterwards, we started recommending that people visit Talk Origins for further discussion on these topics. So it was actually a lot of fun.
There was a nice discussion after we let them we didn't really interrupt them, and then we people had their questions, and then on most of them we had a kind of an answer. So we had a pretty civil discussion about it.
It was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I enjoyed myself.
So anyway, so it's interesting that Lisle produced this thing, and he then went, and part 3 went into this issue about round trip and asymmetric light speeds. I almost think he ran out of time, right? Because what he should have done if he was advancing his thing is he said, well, we have this near instantaneous light speed, but he didn't really tell his believing audience, you can use this when the so-called bad people say, this object is this many light years away, and light takes this much speed to travel, so therefore the Bible's wrong. So he didn't really do that good closure. I'm surprised.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but even if we take his convention that light is instantaneous in one direction, that doesn't change the distance it's away, right?
It does not, but it does mean that the light could get here without the universe being as old as the number of light years it's taken for the most distant light. But the problem is that there are other independent measurements of age of various things in the universe, and they result in ages that preclude young Earth creationism by orders of magnitude.
So here's an example of the problem. If you assume that for whatever reason, light from the edges of the visible universe arrived to us nearly instantaneous, and therefore and that the universe is therefore quite young, that is I guess he's 6,000 years ish, as opposed to the 13.8 billion years. If you make that assumption, right, and it didn't go into that detail, but if you make that assumption, you have a big problem. The nature of the universe back long ago, we say long ago, but the nature of the universe has changed over time. We can see that with observation. So this is not to do with the time travel, but the nature of matter. Early on, in the universe, according to the current models of cosmology, the universe started off. The matter that was in the universe was mostly hydrogen. About 3/4 hydrogen, a little less than 1/4 helium, and a trace of lithium. Right. This was the nucleosynthesis occurred pre-Big Bang flash. Right. That the flash is the 378,000 years after the Big Bang event, where it results in microwave background radiation. But prior to that Big Bang flash, but after the Big Bang, the first elements formed mostly with hydrogen, a little bit of helium, and a trace of lithium. And we can tell that experimentally and confirm that experimentally by looking at signatures in the background radiation and harmonics there. Okay, why does that matter? Well, the very first stars that formed after what we call the Dark Age, after the universe went transparent and the photons just were no longer bound by charged plasma, but they could stream out. And those photons today are the microwave background. After the universe went transparent, the universe entered into a dark era where there's basically nothing emitting new light.
At least in the visible spectrum, there'd still be thermal radiation, right, from black body radiation.
Yes. So there was no real strong light emitters like stars.
Right. Okay.
And so things had temperature, but still the radiation that was being emitted was actually relatively, and so the universe was relatively dark at that point.
Okay.
It wasn't until you had because of early sound waves in the universe and effects of quantum mechanics in the early universe, you had lumps that were more dense than others. Their gravitational forces attracted more material, and stuff accreted, piled up, got high pressure, temperature, and then fusion started. The first stars came out.
These would be the population
several
0
hundred million
stars,
years. Right? Of the first generation stars. Populations we call population 3. That those stars switched on, if you will, some 200 million, 300 million years after the Big Bang. And we can see and they reionized the universe. It's called the Era of Ionization. Now, why is this important? Well, those first stars were just mostly hydrogen, a little bit of helium. It wasn't until those stars, particularly the massive ones, went supernovae that you started getting heavier elements, what astronomers call the metals, right?
Right. Because for astronomer, anything heavier than hydrogen is basically a metal, huh?
Oh, actually heavier than lithium.
Okay, fair enough. It's still not.
I mean, lithium's on the borderline, right?
That's still one of those things where it's like anyone else besides an astronomer would look at you funny if you referred to argon as a metal.
Yeah.
Yeah, sitting here as a chemical engineer, I'm like, wait, what?
so metals, they're not saying they're metallic, but they're classified as metals, right?
Yes, in the astronomy version of the word metal.
Yeah. Which is different than a chemical metal, which is a very specific term. Metals is a class of elements that are non-primordial in their elements. So why does this matter? Well, the very first stars, the very first galaxies, consisted of stars that had primarily hydrogen and a bit of helium and trace of lithium, and that's it. And we can see these very old stars have the what we call the metallicity, which is the amount of elements that are non-primordial that can be found in the star. We can see it from the light traveling. Mm-hmm. So what does this mean with what Lisle said? The first galaxies and the first stars that we can detect show a remarkable absence of elements that were created by nucleosynthesis later on.
So those stars still, we can actually tell based on the spectra of the light we get that there's very low metallicity.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the second generation, so-called population 2 stars, had a bit more.
Oh, we got a double drink. Godzilla started, and then he was interrupted by Mothra.
Oh.
The king and queen of the monsters are arguing, guys. Which
Just
has
remember
happened. That was.
So wait,
remember it's
going with this. Well, the early stars, the stars that are far away, let's say, early stars in the edge of the visible universe, are different in nature than the stars that are really close by. Now, if you do Lisle stuff of instantaneous speed and say there's 6,000 years, you then have to explain, well, why are stars that are far away, we could demonstrate they're far away, of a different nature than the stars that are close by?
And a nature that's predicted by the Big Bang, assuming an isotropic speed of light, right?
Yeah, but as I say, it's like you have to explain. Tell me why the visible edge of the universe is demonstrably different.
Yeah,
this is not an opinion. This is experimental fact. That those stars are different than is now. Because Lisle would say, well, they're only 6,000 years old ish, and the light instantaneously reached us. So therefore, you say, well, then okay. So is there some reason why God made those stars far away different than the ones close by? And
why he did it in a way that confirms predictions of the Big Bang? Because that's an odd thing to do. I would actually, real quick, I would actually say that the observable confirmation of Big Bang hypotheses in distant starlight, assuming an isotropic speed of light, is actually a indirect piece of evidence that light speed is probably isotropic. Because if it weren't, we would expect to see distant galaxies being more or less like nearby galaxies, but they're demonstrably not. And they're not in ways that correspond with what we would expect, Godzilla, an early stage of the universe to look like, assuming in an isotropic speed of light. Sorry, Sphincter.
Oh, I was going to say that one of the things, like, the answer to that question is, why do some things appear older than they should be? Or why do things appear related when they're not, right? And often it's like, well, God made it that way. Like, well, okay, maybe, but if that's the case, then why would God make things make things look older than they really are, or related when they're not, if He wanted you to believe Him?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Also, we have a question from Beach Price, who says there's a report that states coronal mass ejections cause large earthquakes. Your opinion, please, Landon. Landon, what do you think about that? And then I'll give my thoughts.
I don't understand the mechanism of triggering earthquakes based upon coronal mass ejections.
Yeah, that's I agree with that. I have a friend of mine who is definitely very much on the solar activity correlates strongly with seismic activity, and I've yet to actually see that being very well demonstrated. I think while there might be a slightly statistically significant correlation, given that there's no mechanism of action that has, as far as I know, has even been proposed, that's probably a statistical artifact, in my opinion.
And the amount of energy delivered to the Earth is relatively small compared with the binding energies in fault stresses. So
could it be something like simple, like it's not that it causes earthquakes, but coronal mass ejections set off seismometers? Well, without an earthquake,
the same thing as having an earthquake. The only way you get a seismometer to go is if the ground shakes. So if coronal mass ejections were setting off seismometers, it's because they're making the ground shake.
Yeah. So back to the with Lisle stuff, because he didn't really follow through on the set. Another problem with Lisle's instantaneous speed thing is imagine you have this situation. Imagine you have a reflective substance that is 10,000 light years from Earth. And so what Lisle would say is that that so it takes. Oh, sorry.
Was that two?
Okay, so imagine you're at Earth, and there's a substance that's somewhat reflective, 10,000 light years away from Earth. So a light pulse from Earth would take 10,000 years to reach the reflection, and then some amount of the reflection would come back in 10,000 years. Now, in Lisle's thing, part of that transmission would be instantaneous, and part of that would be half the speed of light. So Lisle would agree it would take light 20,000 years to bounce off of that reflection wall and come back. And by the way, there are plenty of reflective stuff in the universe and this sort of thing. We see from the 1987A supernovae, that pulse that went out, we see interstellar material that is bouncing off of and reflections there. So imagine this substance 10,000 light years away, takes 20,000 years for the round trip. Half is instantaneous and the other half is half C. Well, another observer would see the outside, let's say to the side, would see this odd situation where the Earth would basically be bathed in this darkness, and if the universe is only 6,000 years old, basically you'd have this 14,000 years of darkness where the light doesn't reach there, and then the last 6,000 years you'd have light. It was this odd. Yes. So I mean, basically what Lisle has to do in order to save his could light speed be anisotropic, and therefore it's nearly instantaneous, and therefore distant objects can have their light reach the Earth in less than 6,000 years, that are farther than 6,000 light years away. The problem is you'd have to get this progressive creation of galaxies from the edge of the universe towards us for this period of time. That is, you'd have to come up with some way to say, yeah, the galaxies that are far away, that we can prove that are far away, are different, and they somehow are changing their nature as the time marches on.
Yeah, and I do. There is so Smitty points out maybe coronal mass ejections and earthquakes just have a similar periodicity and intensity. It's possible. I don't know if they did. It would probably be coincidental. But we have a question from Fernando, who asks, Landon, what do you think of the electric universe, quote unquote, theory?
I think it's rubbish.
Yeah.
It's experimentally invalid. It caters to people who think that there's a conspiracy out against its stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it as the flat Earth of electromagnetics.
Yeah. So Sphincter, I would say if you really want to look into this, go check out some videos, because we don't really have time to go into the whole thing. Sure. But basically, the electric universe, I hate to use the word theory, I'll call it an idea. I'll give it that much dignity. The electric universe idea, well, perhaps, posits that the main force structuring the universe is not, in fact, gravity at large scales. It is electromagnetism. And that galaxies are essentially electrical circuits where the stars are connected to each other via electrical currents, and it explains craters as primarily electrical events rather than impacts, even though we can watch impacts creating craters in real time.
It has weird stuff about the stars are really just magnetic bubbles that cause them to glow and so forth.
Yeah,
and it gets really, really stupid. And one of the very obvious ways that there's not large currents flowing through them is that you would see the presence of currents would be generating radio fields, right? And that those emissions would be detectable definitely in the radio spectrum, but they're not.
Monk Mayfair says, electric universe hypothesis? No, it's not even a hypothesis. To be a hypothesis, you have to have reason to think it could be true.
Yeah, you have to have rationale behind it. The electric universe is a cult like flat Earth, right? It's think of it, electromagnetism craziness, like flat Earth is on the structure of the universe.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like as long as we ignore exactly what electromagnetism and gravity is, it totally works.
Well, so I'll say this about the electric universe, right? I've said the same thing about flat Earth. They both sound like cool settings for a fantasy novel. You could construct a cool little world where these things are actually true, and the predictions that you could make from them are actually true, and how that interacts with your crazy fantasy setting. But that's the nicest thing I can say, is it would be a cool setting for a fantasy novel, just like Discworld is a cool setting for fantasy novels.
Or like Halo is a cool setting.
Well, the thing about Halo is actually the depictions of Halos in the Halo franchise aren't actually physically impossible from a structural standpoint.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they use rotational artificial gravity, and the size of them is actually within the capability of modern material science. So it would be an enormous undertaking to build such a structure, and it's unlikely that any would ever actually be built for that reason. But they're not physically impossible as artificial ring-shaped habitats with rotational artificial gravity.
Yeah. So I would like to refer people to a site called crank.net, crank.net. And this site is a document, sort of has a listing of various crank theories on there. And for example, if you drill it, you go to crank.net, they document things that are both scientifically craziness from slightly elucid to just
Completely.
bat poop
Yes.
beyond things. But they also document parodies too, because there are people that troll cranks. And so if you were to click on science and then have a subsection on physics and a subsection on astronomy or cosmology, astronomy, and then on stuff with cosmology, and then on stuff relating to, you'll find electric universe there. There's also a search for that, but they have links to sites and commentary about strange stuff, and you think you understand crankiness. But if you start to look at stuff relating to this site, you will find things from crankiness. And they also document that there's elucid crankiness and fringe stuff to anti-crank and parody, right? So they document stuff, but check out some of the descriptions there, like the Nebu.tv and the stuff relating to dark star theory and the origins of stars and Flat Earth Society and stuff. By the way, the Flat Earth Society was formed as a parody organization, right?
Well, interestingly, the people who seem to be genuine flat Earth proponents also complain that the Flat Earth Society is a parody of their actual beliefs. But the thing is, some of the Flat Earth Society's beliefs make more sense than the actual Flat Earthers, because the Flat Earth Society says things like, the reason that we have what seems like gravity is because the Earth is accelerating upwards at a constant 9.8 meters per second squared. Yeah. Which actually would explain the apparent gravity, whereas the density and buoyancy that Flat Earthers actually propose doesn't make any sense at all. We also have for $4.49 dues from Ian Chen. No reason, just wanted you to read out my name later.
Well, thank you, Ian Chen, for your $4.49 Australian. You, of course, are in the alleged reduce. Continent.
Yes, the fake continent.
The flat earthers, they aren't even there. But again, if you go to crank.net/EM, as in electric magnetism.html, you will see some of the really bizarre stuff relating to this electric thing and some of the really weird.
It's a fun deep dive into the nonsense. And actually, speaking of deep dives, I think I might have said something about this, but I'm thinking about trying to do some Bigfoot content from two standpoints. One is the plausibility of the idea of a large hominoid existing in North America from just a biological standpoint. Which, by the way, I'm going to tell you right now, it's very high. There's no good reason that couldn't exist from just the standpoint of biology and like ecology and whatnot. but then also looking into the actual, is there good evidence for the existence of such a creature? To which, spoiler alert, the answer is no. So,
Well, have you heard of the theory that Bigfoot is actually literally out of focus? Like
he's a blurry monster.
yeah. So the problem is you can't photograph him properly.
So by the way, if anyone else wants to follow Ian's Chin's thing and do a nice super chat to contribute there, we'd be happy to read out your name, like we did for Ian Chen.
It's true. Also, Ian Chen super chats again to say for two $99 dues. Landon, you are so cool. I have a world harness. Oh, good. So that way you're not falling off the bottom of the earth. Good.
Yeah, because that's been Red Eyes helped me as well in terms of understand the need for a harness, because now it gets trickier when you're on a boat in the ocean out there. I'm not quite sure how those harnesses work, but Australians know that sort of thing.
Yes, I mean.
And by the way, I should say, Ian, do your ground harnesses help protect you from drop bears?
Ooh, that's a good question. Do drop bears have to have their own harnesses? Because wouldn't they just drop off the earth when they drop? Oh, and there's Godzilla.
Okay. That's a good point. I mean,
yeah.
Do drop bears are they anti-gravity and they drop the other direction?
Yeah, they drop up.
They're dangerous?
Oh, that's clever. I like that.
So Ian, do another super chat and tell us about drop bears and harnesses and being on the land slightly down under.
Well, while we're waiting for that, though, it is starting to be wrap-up time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give some channel updates, and then we're going to go to Sphincter of Doom first, and then Landon for final words. So let's see. First of all, today is Tuesday. Tomorrow, the plan is currently that I am going to be on Cheshire Vic's channel to do to help with a Goblin Reads episode concerning Kent Hovind's I gotta double check. Is it $500,000 or $500 million lawsuit against the federal government? Is it it's $500+ million lawsuit against the federal government. So we're gonna go over that tomorrow. Bent Hovind should be there. So stay tuned for that. It'll probably be sometime around like I think it's like 5:30 or 6 Pacific, and like 7:30 or 8 Eastern. So stay tuned for that. I'll tweet out the link, and I'm sure that she'll tweet out the link and whatnot. We do have an update from Ian Chen for two $99 dues. Drop bears always find their own level, silly. Oh, there it goes.
I mean, what can you say about that? That's perfectly consistent Australian outback logic.
Yep.
Well, it is winter there right now.
Oh, and for $2.99, Ian Chen says, Daps, more Landon on your channel, please. Don't worry, this is not like the planned end of Landon being on the channel. No. Landon will be back.
We'll have other things out there. I mean, it might be in later September because of things I'm doing, but I'll definitely be back and enjoying things. So please, please do so. And I appreciate all the kind comments, and I apologize for the errors I made, but also hope that Lisle can sometime apologize for the errors he made.
I doubt it. But let's see, Thursday. So hopefully Thursday there are two things happening. One is I'm hoping to have a premiere of the next update for the Speculative Evolution project, because I have the final two creatures that I want to include in that update finished in terms of their images. In fact, actually, I'll just bring one of them up. So you can probably see this is one of them. I can move around a little bit because I'm not fully capturing the whole thing in the... Come on, there we go. So yeah, this is an image of one of the creatures that's going to be featured. So we've got... Yeah, so hopefully that's going to be Thursday, but that will depend on how fast I can get the animation done and the audio and the editing and the rendering out the video. So it's going to be borderline. If that isn't the case, then the next episode of Creationism is a Mega Catastrophe will air instead. And then, following whatever premiere happens on Thursday, I will be on Modern Day Debate to have a debate about birds and dinosaurs with Mr. Batman. At least according to James and Mr. Batman, that's what's happening. Mr. Batman has stood me up once before, so we'll see what happens. But that's the plan. Friday, nothing should be happening, and I think something is happening Saturday, but I will be honest, I honestly cannot remember what I think I have scheduled, and I have to investigate that, because, yeah, I got no clue. But I think something's happening Saturday, and if nothing happens Saturday, then I took a Saturday off, guys. Sorry. Then next Tuesday, we're again pushing Kent with Bent. Instead, we are having an early episode of Eric with Erica. It should probably be airing around noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. So that will be a good time for all my European fans to come in. It might be a good like lunchtime or, you know, last couple hours of work time. Which reminds me, if you have a recommendation for an Eric Hovind video, send it to me because I have not finalized what that's going to be. Oh yeah, Speed of Sound on Saturday. Why can't I remember that? Look, there are some things that just cannot stick in my brain. So, T-Lane, here's what I'm going to say to me. Remind me like 3 more times on each different day, because for some reason, it's like when I'm learning a language, there are some words that just will not stick in my brain. And I don't know why it is. But yeah, Speed of Sound Saturday. We're going to talk with Speed of Sound about, you know, science, evolution, his counter-creationism work, all sorts of stuff. We'll do some, yeah, it'll be great. And hopefully I don't have problems like I did with my other guests with Speed of Sound. So yeah, then the next Tuesday is going to be a Eric with Erica, because we are doing it early to avoid overlapping with other shows. And there you go. I think that is it for channel news. Sphincter of Doom, let's give your final words, final thoughts. Also, if you have anything to plug, you can do so, and then I'm going to get you out of this meeting.
Well, I don't have anything to plug that I know of. Final thoughts, it's always enjoyable to be here with both you and Dr.
Thank you
Landon.
for coming on, and your insightful comments. It helped. It added to the show.
But I'm a man of few words in this case, so I don't have anything else to say.
All right. Well, Landon, what do you got for us?
Okay, a couple of things on there. I you know, because you know, people need to be prone to mirth and laughter. Let me give you 3 comics that you should consider and follow. And again, these comics are comics that are offensive. They get a laugh out of you. So if you're one of those people that is easily offended, you probably need to watch these comics to be less offensive. So the first one is a marvelous improv guy named Pent Monk. Look for PIMPMUNKX YouTube. PIMPMUNKX. Check him out for his Morning Wood show. Another comic that I'm also these are comics I'm also supporting as well. Isaac Butterfield, Butterfield, an Australian. He is also very offensive, and he's proud of it. He's a man who has never apologized for a joke, and good on him for that. Isaac Butterfield. A third person who's actually a distant relative is a lady named Janie Godley, Godley. She's a Scottish stand-up comedian who has been mostly taking some of the press briefings by the First Minister of Scotland, and she dubs her own message over the top. It's quite funny. So check out Janie Godley. Now, with regards to speaking of Godley, a group of people that are into godly things is the Milwaukee Atheists. Check out Milwaukee Atheist YouTube. They have a Sunday show where they get people like me once a month to read the Bible. We're going through the Bible, reading that stuff, and they actually detail stuff, the discussion there. They have a bunch of documentaries and things regarding the history of the early church, of Israelites to medieval times, so forth. Check out the Milwaukee Atheists. Finally, I want to get a shout out to the Bin podcast, a group of really fun folks there. I'm going to be on the Bin podcast on August 6th. Just a general hangout stuff. It happens to be also Hiroshima Day. And we're going to be announcing that on August 9th for the Bin podcast Patreons, I'm doing a special Patreon-only show regarding nuclear weapons and the non-proliferation issues.
That is really interesting. So before we wrap up, I've just got a few final things. We've got a $1.99 super chat from Dave Delafiore, who says, Dapper Dino rocks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I also want to say a special thank you to all of our super chatters, including Ben Tovind, no relation, Eric Verthaler, 92, Dave Delafiore, and Ian Chen, who are all helping support the channel in one of the most direct ways, because quite frankly, I'm trying to get this to the point where it is a sustainable thing that I can do to keep up this current level of output. And I'm not there yet, but I'm growing in that direction. So
but folks, if this is content you like, contribute to it, right? The new method of both, content creators, be they comedians or educational, like this, the Dapper Diner Show. If this is something you like, contribute something, even if it's a buck, right? One, it helps the person like Dapper know someone cares, and two, it actually helps fund it. So if you don't want to have the net full of all kinds of stupid stuff, and you find something you like, please support that creator.
Yep.
And I thank you very much for those people that are your patrons. Thank you for people that have contributed super chats. Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. And so the final few things are, one, yes, there's a Patreon. You can join the channel as a channel member. They both give you access to the patron/member Discord server. There's a Teespring store if you want some merch. And also, I'm probably going to be playing Deep Rock Galactic on Top Hats Off. It's not 100% sure that that's what's going to be happening. But also, because Monk Mayfair is bringing it up, if you guys want to discuss Klingon as a language, I am perfectly happy to do so while doing space dwarf mining on a tiny moon in some unknown solar system. So head over to that channel. It'll probably be happening, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes or so from now, I'll go live. And yeah, so check that out. But thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a great, whatever time of day it is for you. Have a great rest of whatever day it is basically
good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone loaded, because if it's from dawn up till noon, it's morning. Mm-hmm. If it's the noon hour, it's good noon. If it's afternoon but before sunset, it's good afternoon. And then good evening, the sunset, and good night when it's actually in the twilight. So that's why it depends upon your time zone and latitude.
Yep. And so stay tuned. It's a busy week for the channel.
And hit the like button.
Yes, hit the like button. Although I'm currently seeing almost as many likes as I have viewers, so we're pretty good there. But all right, that's it for me. Thank you, everybody. I'm ending the stream.